Hello, everyone, and welcome to episode 28 of the Clown Fiesta podcast. Blue Jay here, joined by JNT250, and it's time to talk about the LCS Lock In Tournament because it was freaking awesome. JNT, give me your thoughts on how the whole tournament went and what you think should be changed, if anything, whatsoever.
Yeah, I really loved the Lock In Tournament. It was so good to see best of series that weren't just the playoffs. It kind of just felt like there were so few games during the entire season. Like a stat that got thrown out there right at the end of the Lock In Tournament that I was pretty surprised to hear about was Cloud9 played 17 games in the Lock In Tournament, and in the
Yeah, that's
previous
insane.
format of a split, there's only 18 regular season games, so they pretty much played an entire season just in the last 3 weeks. So it definitely gives a lot of the teams who progressed very far into the tournament a lot of practice. It's kind of unfortunate just how the formatting worked that a lot of the bottom tier teams who actually probably need these games the most, actually ended up playing the least games. But for the most part, the tournament was super enjoyable. I don't think I've heard any negative feedback from anybody really saying that the tournament was bad. I think the only concern that people had coming into it was that it might not be super competitive because teams won't want to like reveal their strategies, but it didn't feel like that was going on at all. It felt like, teams were playing up to their expected standards for the most part in terms of the top teams looking very good and the bottom teams, obviously a lot of them are new teams bringing a lot of new pieces, so they're not going to look so good, but no negativity over here. I thought it was great.
Yeah, there's almost nothing to complain about. It was so good. And your point about like C9 playing 17 games, first of all, that's a whack ton of games. Second, we talked and you mentioned the incentive to want to win. We weren't sure if teams going to take it serious. Well, that is such an advantage to have played 17 games before the season starts. That is the incentive now. I think a lot of us were so focused on the money not really being a big incentive, myself included, like 25 grand per play. Like, don't get me wrong, 25 grand is 25 grand. Like, that's, I'm sure every player wants that, and that's great. But I think the more valuable incentive, especially for the TL players who are, making absolute bank, almost all of them, I would guess, the incentive is the practice that you get being able to play against the best teams. And it gives you that incentive to want to hit the ground running for when the season starts. And so it was just an all around success. Absolutely everything was good about it. Viewership was great. The games felt like real competitive games. I didn't once feel like anyone was trolling or just trying, just practicing different comps. It didn't feel like scrims at all, which was my main concern going in. And so I don't know, huge props to those who organized it and those who came up for the idea of the format. I think it's just a success.
Yeah, the only argument that I think I've heard is that, well, the games don't really matter because teams would be scrimming normally anyway. But the thing that I think is a real big difference between like having this tournament and not having this tournament is these games are quote unquote stage games. Like obviously they're not playing in the LCS studio or anything, or they're not going to be playing in the LCS studio, but it is technically a stage game where like you're in your normal like routinely setup of doing a week of LCS where you're doing your draft preparations, you're playing at a specific time, the broadcast is going and everything. So I think it's a much better quality of game to be playing than just scrims because you're in your normal routine that you would be going into the season.
Yeah, I have no doubt that these games were much more valuable than scrims. No doubt whatsoever. It felt like real competitive games, and I think the viewership, like I mentioned before, I think that really reflects how intense a game really feels. Like if it's a boring game, people just won't watch. But viewership did really, really well. Probably as highest as you'll see for the start of spring split, quote unquote. So yeah,
Mhm.
honestly, just really, really good. I want to talk a little bit about meta though, because I think that was one of the other advantages that the lock-in tournament brought was it kind of started developing a meta, and that's something that we haven't really seen going into the start of a spring split before. Is now you have an idea, let's say, because meta is always shifting and always changing, but now you kind of have an idea of what the meta is going to be going into spring split, which is something we've never seen before. So, what are your thoughts on the meta so far?
Ooh dear.
Yeah, true.
If
Oh
you're
dear.
not pretty
Yes.
much if you're not playing Udyr, like if Udyr's open and you're not playing it or you don't know how to play it and you're forced to ban it on blue side, you're kind of just trolling. Like this champion is just completely rolling over the meta in terms of how it fits with specific team comps. Like it works really well with enchanter supports or even enchanter top lanes who like to run the Moonstone Renewer Staff of Flowing Water build, which is pretty much all that Udyr utilizes is movement speed and just constant healing, so he can get as many like bear slaps out as possible. It really just seemed that like Udyr took over this entire tournament. I don't think, if I remember correctly, there wasn't a single game of Udyr played in either week 1 or week 2. I don't think there was any Udyr played in the quarterfinal matches.
I don't
But
remember, honestly.
maybe there was one, but if so, I can't remember it. But in the semifinals and finals, Udyr was pick or ban in every single game, and it just seems that this champion works really well in terms of how the game is moving right now with the spikes within specifically the early and the mid game. There's not a lot of games that are going super late game, so you're not really running into this issue where you feel like Udyr is falling off or the champion gets useless. And it also just synergizes so well with all the other champions that are performing so well right now. It works really well with roaming mid laners you can combo it, like a Galio, like a Twisted Fate. It works well with any bruiser or duelist top laners because Udyr just provides a lot of gank assistance, being able to just run in there with the bear slap. You hit him with the Phoenix stance, you get your phase rush off, and you just will continually smack them throughout the entirety of the lane until you hit tower. And it just also works well with like I just said, the Moonstone, supportive top laners. It just empowers the Udyr to just do whatever the fuck he wants, run into enemy jungle, run into like literally 3 people and not give a fuck because he's just going to get healed for like 50% of his HP. The champion's just kind of bonkers right now.
Yeah, you're seeing comps built around it, like you mentioned with the enchanters, but also one of the picks that I really liked with it, and I thought was really smart, was the Thresh. And I saw Team Liquid pull that off because what they would do is this was in the EG series, I believe. When EG would take the Olaf, first of all, Olaf was prioritized higher than Udyr for basically the whole tournament until the very end. You saw that kind of swap. But Udyr would run in, bear slap just to force Olaf to ulti, and then you would just lantern right out with the Thresh pick. So that was a combo that I liked a lot because as soon as Olaf's ultimate was over, Udyr was running right back in, and it was like a free pick all the time. So I really liked that duo, the Udyr paired with the Thresh. And the other thing that I wanted to mention was um, even though Udyr was like we mentioned that it was being prioritized as the tournament went on, it was completely running over everything that we thought was good before. And so even though we're talking about how Udyr's a top tier pick, it's not just a top tier pick, it's a top tier pick that is beating out all of the other top tier picks. And that's what I think puts this champion at its own tier, like it's S tier for that reason. And we saw a lot less Nidalee, for example. We saw a lot of Nidalee towards the start of the tournament. We didn't really see as much as the tournament went on, and I think that it showed how valuable Nidalee is with the Renekton, but how little value you could put on that champion without the Renekton or without that point and click CC.
Yeah, part of it, in terms of just your Nidalee point, I thought that kind of just happened also because the junglers that were still left in the tournament weren't exactly like the Nidalee style of players. But I do definitely agree, like, Udyr is, like, it is a power pick now. However, I am of the opinion that I think it will start to fall off in terms of how teams are able to figure out and adapt and deal with it. Because whenever champions like this kind of just, like, rise up into priority out of nowhere, a lot of its success comes from playing teams, like when you're playing a team who doesn't exactly know how to play against it or they don't know how to draft against it. Obviously, Team Liquid, they had a very good, I think they utilized Udyr the best in terms of their strategies around it, in terms of picking it with bruiser top laners.
Coach
And
Jet, man.
yeah, and you saw in that game 5 how Udyr just completely ran over that game when he went topside after Alfari ruined the lane level 1 after Fudge took a semi-bat all in. And then you saw it also in the what was I going to say? Whatever. Nevertheless, I think teams are gonna figure out a way to deal with the champion. I do think Olaf is still like a decent pick into it. It's kind of just you have to make that decision. If the Udyr is gonna run in and try to bear slap the Olaf, like you're gonna have to commit as a team to either kill the Udyr or back off. And I think that the champion is strong, but it will start to decline when teams are able to figure it out.
Yeah, I think you're right about that. And I think in the meantime, until those counters are found, I think you're just going to see the biggest counter being the ban, right? I think it's just going to have a much higher ban rate than we saw in this tournament. But I mean, that's what happens with every OP pick. Like that happens all the time. There was other things that we saw that aren't really surprising, like Kaisa's like the most prioritized AD carry right now. She's kind of busted. She probably needs a slight nerf, nothing crazy, but she is a little bit stronger than all the other AD carries. I know a good friend of ours, probably in the chat right now, would recommend just buffing all the other AD carries to get to Kaisa's level, but nonetheless, that's not a surprise that we're seeing Kaisa. TF is something we always see. That was another pick that we saw. Another thing that we saw that I wasn't ready for, and I probably should have been, was the Senna pick, though. Senna getting souls is like, it is unbelievable how quickly she gets her souls now. When C9 was the one was the team that utilized this pick the most, and the soul count going up very very quickly, and so I think Senna's another pick that we're going to see going into spring. What do you think about that?
Yeah, I mean, I guess I would say like Senna has seen some play across the rest of the world, but Cloud9 has just been running back the fasting Senna as opposed to this more 80 carry style of Senna build that people have been doing, where they go Kraken Slayer into Rage Blade, and they're running at 80 carry where they take the farm, and it's a normal lane where 80 carry takes farm,
With Tom
support
Kench,
support.
right?
No, I'm
Yeah.
saying players have been running the Senna just as an 80 carry, no Tom Kench
I just
involved.
mean Cloud9 has been
Yeah,
running it with Tom Kench.
they are specifically running the fasting Senna with a Tom Kench, and Sven was putting a lot of work in. I know we were trying to, whenever we could, just ourselves watching the broadcast, periodically check in on the soul counters. I think Sven had like 50 souls at 14 minutes into the game. And I don't know if it was in that specific game, but in another game, he hit 100 souls at 23 minutes. And considering the amount of statistics that you get on Senna when you start stacking those souls and you pass every 20 soul threshold, it's really nuts. And if you're able to sort of abuse the system of Tom Kench taking the farm and Senna specifically focusing on the souls, it just gets super gold efficient in terms of you don't have to put so much gold into an item build, and you just really focus on getting those stats. It can be really strong. I think Sven was really putting on display like how to use that champion.
Yeah, when I see someone at 100 souls at around the 20-minute mark, or what'd you say, 23? Whatever it
Yeah.
was, I think the champion needs a nerf, honestly. When you see that, like, that's kind of ridiculous, and just cancer to play against too. Like, that is not that is not fun to play against, and it's kind of insane to see someone who's not even farming put out that kind of because you have to remember, one of the great things about fasting Senna is that you get another farmed champion in the game. Like, Tom
Mm-hmm.
Kench is no longer like, yes, he's a supportive champion, but he's no longer a support because you get all of that gold income on another champion. Now you just have an extra tank on your team. It's too valuable to me, and I think it needs a little bit of a nerf. But I want to know your opinions on if there's anything else you would like to see going into spring. Is there any champions that you think we've seen a little bit of, but you want to see more, or any champions that we haven't seen that you think needs to start getting some play?
I think one thing that we kind of noticed was the top lane champion pool was pretty narrow for the most part, especially when there are a lot of bans that get thrown. And one of the things that Cloud9 I think did really well in their Team Liquid series was picking the Malphite into the two immobile champions in the Aphelios and the Syndra. I think I even said this in season 10 when Alorum was like heavily picking the Malphite, and I was kind of talking about how I don't think Malphite is this like super AFK pick where you just like you're an alt bot and you just alt in. I think the champion is very strong and it does well into a ton of immobile champions. It really saw in that game 4, I think it was game 4, where Cloud9 picked the Malphite into the Aphelios Syndra, and anytime Fudge was pressing R on Aphelios would get instantly blown up, and Cloud9 was really winning every single mid game fight because of that Malphite and its ability to just disrupt the entire enemy team. And I think in this meta that we're seeing right now, where stuff is so focused on early Dragon fights, early Rift Herald fights, and mid-game team fights around Baron, having a champion that can be so impactful with just like one spell, as long as you hit it, is really important. And I think, depending on the types of ADC and mid picks that we see, like in instances where you see a double immobile mid and AD carry, I think Malphite is a really good response to sort of punish the immobility and, really just enable your team in those like really important fights.
Yeah, no, I couldn't agree more. And I think that what you made me think of is we're still seeing a little bit of Ornn in the top lane, but we're seeing Malphite take over a little bit more to be that role of tank and just gracefully lose lane, but be a beast later against the immobile carries. I think we're seeing Malphite slot into that position a little bit more than we would have seen last year. It would have been like Ornn was the pick for that, and I think now it's not as obvious that it's always Ornn. I think we did see a Scion game, or was I watching LEC or
I
LCK?
don't think there was a Scion game.
Okay, I'm
But
confusing with
I
region.
think part of the reason I do like your point and how like Malphite is kind of filling that Ornn role. I think part of that
Yeah.
is because we're seeing the game really get decided much earlier, like in the game, whether it's early game in terms of like Dragons or Rift Heralds, or mid game when it's like 20 minutes, teams are taking Barons and closing out the game. And Ornn doesn't have as much value as I think a Malphite does when the game is not progressing that far, because you don't get all the Ornn upgrades. Like, games are ending pretty much when champions are like level 11 to level 14, and at that point Ornn gets one upgrade. Unless the game is going super late, I think a Malphite is a little bit more valuable than the Ornn.
A little bit stronger in the mid game, then you don't need to wait for all of those ornaments, so to speak.
Yeah.
Yeah, makes sense. I actually had 3 champions. I said I was going to try to do 1 or 2 champions, but there's actually 3 champions that I want to see going into spring. That is, the first one is Rakan, and I know you've heard me say this before, but I'll say it again. I think Rakan is very good with the Galio meta. We're seeing a lot of Galio. I really like it into Galio because I remember TSM made me come to this realization last year. I think that Rakan is great for engaging and disengaging. You bait out the Galio ult really well with the Rakan, and so I like that. But it's also, if Galio is on your team, you also want Rakan. It's such great engage, and you wombo that really well with the Galio. So I think Rakan should be played a little bit more. But I will say, the reason why I don't think we're seeing as much Rakan is because he's just not that great into the Leona or the Alistar. They're pretty good. They're pretty popular picks right now, and so that's why I don't think we're seeing Rakan. But in games that there is, like, I don't know, maybe like Seraphine or something like that, where there's not that big beefy guy in the support role, I think Rakan would be a lot more valuable. So that's one. And the other one that I want to talk about right now is Poppy, because there's a lot of priority on the Camille in the top lane right now, whether it's pick or ban. I think we saw Cloud9 banning it a lot, or first picking it in their first rotation. So there's a lot of priority on Camille, but I think Poppy's a fine champion, and it's a great counter to the Camille. So those are 2 champions that I really want to see right now. What are your thoughts on those?
It prevents the Crumbs strategy of drafting too many dashes.
Yeah,
That's the counter to Crumbs' whole like argument there. I definitely think that the reason we're not seeing a ton of Rakan is a lot of the premier supports right now just kind of straight up counter Rakan. I think it's still a super strong champion, and if it's pickable in a certain spot, I think teams should be picking it. But
it's like a niche pick right now.
It's a very strong niche pick, but just the problem is it runs all the meta supports right now, or the majority of them, like the Leona, the Alistar, the Gragas, they're all just Rakan counters, so it's pretty hard.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. The last one that I want to talk about, and I reached out to a couple of guys in the live chat, our friends Motu and NA's Finest. I did reach out to them about this. NA's Finest, for those that don't know, is a Janna one trick. He plays a lot of that freaking champion. And I think Janna is another champion that we should see more of in the LCS, specifically with all the heavy dive that we're seeing right now. I thought of it more into the Alistar, into the Leona, into the Rel. I think it's great against Rel. But NA's Finest pointed out that it's actually really good at the Galio as well, which is also in meta. There's so much dive in meta right now, and we're seeing very, very little Janna. I'm honestly a really big fan of the WW combo with Jhin. Janna W leads really well into Jhin W. It works for finding some picks. That's something I really like. That's a small thing, but something nonetheless. And so Janna was the other one champion that I think we should see a little bit more of in the LCS. But I think we've only seen one game. I think Diamond played it at the start of the tournament, and I don't think we've seen it since. So that's the only other champion that I want to see going into spring.
I thought it was Joey, but maybe it was Diamond.
Oh, it could have been.
It might have been in that FlyQuest Immortals game. But it
could be.
I don't know.
We only saw
okay, it was Diamond. So okay, it was Diamond then.
Okay, we have in the live chat confirmation that it was Diamond. But yeah, that's another pick that I want to see. So shout out to NA's Finest and Mo2 for your tutelage on that pick. Anything else? Is there anything else that you want to see going into spring, or something that you think deserves a little bit of, I don't know what the word is, but yeah, is there any other champions you want to see?
I don't know. Meta's pretty good right now. It's not a boring meta. It's you can pick a lot of things. I think when metas are like super black and white in terms of if this team gets X champions, they just instantly win the game. I don't like those kinds of meta. But I think when there are a lot of OP picks in the meta, it makes for a lot more excitement, because specifically in the draft phase, you really need to like critically think and comp around like, okay, if we're giving them this on like blue side first pick, what are we getting in response? Like, especially when we see teams that are red side teams that give up really overpowered first picks and then pick some really like sleeper shit on red side 1-2, then you can get into a big problem. But when you're able to balance the amount of like OP picks that each team gets, I think it's pretty good.
Yeah, the only other thing that I want to talk about very quick, or just mention really quick, is that I don't know. You might know this. Do you know if the patch that they were playing on in the lock-in tournament was pre or post
They were playing
Gore
on
Drinker nerf?
they were playing on 11-11 by
Because I had heard that there was supposed to be nerfs around that item. I don't know if they've come in yet, but we've seen some Gore Drinker champions in the top lane, which could also influence the meta as well.
uh,
We've seen a little bit of Aatrox and a couple other things as well. So that could, I hope that doesn't lead us to just an Enchanter top lane, but it could.
I'm not sure exactly
No
when
more, no
those
more
Gore Drinker
Renekton, no
nerfs
more Aatrox.
came out, but they were playing on patch 11-11. The one thing to note, moving into 11.2, which is what they're going to be playing on in week 1, is like the Sunfire Cape nerfs, and the other two tank mythics are getting kind of buffed because they're getting decreased in price. So that specifically like attacks the tank Gragas in the top lane. Like the pick is a little less playable, and if you want to play, you actually have to build Turbo Chem Tank to get that like extra 5 ability haste on the legendary passive buff. But I just know that they're playing on 11-11 for the whole lock-in tournament, and moving forward, they're going to 11.2.
Okay. All right, let's get into the lock-in tournament. Let's recap that a little bit because we had quite a few series over the weekend. By quite a few, I mean a few, 3 of them. What do we want to start with? We want to start with Friday, obviously. We'll just go Friday,
Yeah, yeah.
Saturday, Sunday.
We'll go in order.
Okay. Okay, so we had 100 Thieves against Cloud9. I will eat my words on this. I predicted 100 Thieves. I'll also say I felt really confident that 100 Thieves was going to win this series, and I was wrong. C9, or pardon me, 100 Thieves went ahead 2-0, and C9 pulled off the reverse sweep. Give me some of your thoughts on this series, JNT.
Yeah, like holy moly, 100 Thieves is getting flashbacks already. Like it's
It was
kind
such a
of
good series, though. Like,
yeah,
even I know it's disappointing, but it was good.
it was a good series, but it kind of had that same feeling of that previous Golden Guardians versus TSM series. Like they got up 2-0 and everyone was hyped they were up 2-0, and then they lost that game 3 and they're like, "Oh no, here we go again." It's like the "ah shit, here we go again" meme, like that Twitter meme from GTA.
Yeah.
Like that's just what I thought of when I thought of this series. But I don't know. To me, it felt like that C9 was very just mistake heavy, but still won the series, which is kind of weird to
Yes.
say. Because it seemed like in almost every single game, Cloud9 was making a ton of minor mistakes, but they were still able to come on top. Like specifically, I think in just game 1, Cloud9 kind of had the game 1, in my opinion, when they were playing the late game scaling comp. 100 Thieves botched that early tower dive at like level 3 where Demonte like whiffed his E on a Galio taunted target. And Cloud9 is like even on Drakes, even on kills at like 15 minutes into the game. Or even it was later than that. It was like 17 minutes of the game. And they decided to face check Baron or face check Dragon with no vision as the scaling comp with no front line. And they pretty much like lose the game off of that. So I do, and even in game 2, I think Cloud9 was in a pretty solid spot in terms of their comp. That was like the first time that they whipped out the Udyr. But it just felt like it was more Cloud9 shooting themselves in the foot in games 1 and game 2, for me at least. Obviously, I think 100 Thieves, they did a very good job of capitalizing on a lot of the Cloud9 mistakes, and that was their reasons for why game 1 looked so dominant was because once 100 Thieves got that lead, they just like rolled with it, took Baron and ended the game really quickly. Same with game 2. Once 100 Thieves got into that good spot, they were able to end the game very quickly. And I think that is, it shows good things from the 100 Thieves side that when able to get a lead, they can close out very cleanly. But at the same time, Cloud9, it just seemed like they were winning a ton of 50-50s in terms of like Dragon Smites, especially in these later games. Cloud9 was team fighting actually very well in the 3 games that the reverse sweep happened. It was just kind of weird how the whole series played out, where it did feel like 100 Thieves was playing better overall, but Cloud9 still won.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. I think 100 Thieves was the better team, and I think that's rare that I say that the better team lost in a best of 5. I don't think it's rare for the better team to lose one game, but a best of series like that, I think it's pretty rare. And yeah, it did feel to me like somehow 100 Thieves managed to lose that game. And I want to point out that The series that best of five, but also the one that we go back to against TSM in summer playoffs. I need to bring up the fact that those are the only two series where I think 100 Thieves slash Golden Guardians at the time with four of the five players where they were expected to win. And I think that's one of the things, like when they came in as underdogs, that's when they absolutely smashed TSM with the 3-0. And after they beat TSM 3-0 in playoffs, then it was like 100 Thieves was expected to beat TSM and they just found ways to lose games. Like I think that's the kind of the same thing that happened in this series. I think 100 Thieves was expected to win. Now, I know that Travis Gafford actually did a poll like on his Twitter, and it was very 50-50 as to who people thought would win. But I think the only reason why it was 50-50 is because there's more Cloud9 fans than 100 Thieves fans. I think most of the analysts or experts would say that 100 Thieves should have won that series, and they managed to lose. And so I wonder if that's going to be a problem for them moving forward. Now that there's this weight on your shoulders, this pressure that you should be winning, I wonder if that's something that maybe these players aren't used to having. And I wonder if that weighs on them. I really do because, yeah, to me, they should have won this series. And even if they were to replay this series again, I would predict 100 Thieves.
That's interesting because I want to backtrack a little bit from what I said because I think there's a bit of a distinction I want to make. I did say that I think 100 Thieves looked like the better team in the series, but I still do think Cloud9 is the better team. You could, the amount of mistakes that Cloud9 was making across all of these games, there were too many to count. And while they were still since they made all these mistakes and were still able to win, so I think that does say something about the strength of Cloud9. We'll get into a bit later, but you could say the same in their Team Liquid series. The amount of mistakes that they made and were still able to claw themselves back into that series and almost reverse sweep again. But specifically with this series, just the amount of mistakes that were going on and them still able to pull out the win, I think does show the true potential of this Cloud9 roster, and if they can clean things up, how good of a team they will be.
That's a very good point because they are getting wins despite not, like, we know that they're not looking at their best, right? We
Mm-hmm.
know that this team can be better than this. And I think that your point is valid, but I want to highlight even more the fact that they're getting wins with an absolute top gap. Let's be honest, there's no sugarcoating this. Fudge looks inferior at the moment. Like
Yeah.
he is not looking good right now. And I had to go pull up the numbers because I did the math on the CSD for the whole series of Cloud9 versus 100 Thieves, and Someday absolutely gapped him in just about every game. So just to be clear, these are the final numbers at the end of the game, which doesn't always paint a fair picture, but I think these numbers are too extreme to ignore. So game one, he was down 17 CS by the end of the game. Sure, that's fine. Game two, 61 CS. Game three, he was down 102 CS. He got Flame Horizoned and they won the game. That is really carrying your top laner there. And I don't care what the matchup looks like because look, a lot of times these numbers are matchup dependent, right? If you have a lesser matchup, you should fall behind in CS. I don't behind that far though. 102 CS is insane. Anyways, game four, he was down 27 CS, and game five, 51 CS. I don't know the average. I know it's a freaking lot. And to be able to win a series when you're getting gapped that hard, I think that really speaks to just how hard C9 was able to carry through mostly the bot lane and the jungle, I think. So a lot of props to Blabber and C9's bot lane for being able to pull out that series.
Mm-hmm. What was I gonna say? I do think that Fudge, he showed some signs of potential, but it is very clear that in isolated 1v1s, he's just simply getting outclassed. And I don't know if a lot of his issues are like with his wave management or how he's playing these early laning phases, because pretty much almost every game that Cloud9 has played in their series against TSM, in their series against 100 Thieves, and in their series against Team Liquid, he's getting huge early waves stacked against him where the enemy jungler is then pressuring dives on the top lane tower. Whether the team chooses to dive the tower, kill Fudge, Fudge has to waste his TP and come back, or they just simply push Fudge off the wave and he's losing 1 to 2 waves constantly in the first 10 minutes of the game. And I don't know if that's an issue with Fudge's early laning phase or if that's a problem that Cloud9 is having in terms of Blabber's early pathing and either choosing to sacrifice top lane for the rest of the map in terms of wanting to help out mid, get early dragons, get early Rift Heralds, get bot lane ahead, or if there's just some disconnect going on with the top lane.
Yeah. And the other thing too, even though I just want to mention, I think all of 100 Thieves players, all of them are looking good right now, despite losing that. I still think 100 Thieves is looking like one of the better teams in the league right now. And yeah, I just think that if you look at every single lane, this is a team that I have high hopes for going into spring and for the rest of the year, quite honestly. As long as this roster stays together and doesn't mental boom, this team I think has a good chance of going to.
Damn, some statements.
Um
See, it not even started yet.
yeah, do you want to go over, let's go over to the other semifinal series where we had TL versus Evil Geniuses.
Mm-hmm.
This series, I'm just gonna say it. It sucked, and it wasn't because of the gameplay. It sucked because they took like hours to start the freaking games, man. They had they had like, I don't even remember. I think they were live for like 3 hours or maybe it was 4 hours by the time the first two games were played. And I know, look, we talk about this all the time. They're doing the broadcast remote, but this series felt really really slow, and I'm not gonna lie, it was hard to even enjoy the games just because it dragged on forever.
Yeah, to be honest, all of the bevy of technical delays, it just made me not super interested in this series, and I think that was primarily because before the series started, I just went in with this mindset that TL is going to smash EG. I had some hopes for EG. I predicted a 3-1 because I thought there could be a case where EG gets a good draft or a good early game and is able to take the win because they've been looking quite clean. But it's pretty much over from the get-go in pretty much every game.
Yeah, you know what I felt like in this game? First of all, do you remember what I predicted? Did I predict
You,
3-0?
you predicted 3-0.
Okay. Um, the reason I predicted 3-0 was not because I thought EG was bad. It's just because I think TL is very good right now. I think top through bottom, they're better than pretty much everyone on the EG lineup. Well, not pretty much everyone on the EG lineup.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's why for me, I went with the 3-0. But to your point, like it wasn't like it was a free series. EG's still a good team, and I think they're another one that should be in the conversation to maybe go to Worlds at the end of the year. Right now, I would put 100 Thieves ahead of them, of course, but I don't think that EG is miles away. We saw Impact have a really good start to the Lock In Tournament, and I think he did get gapped a little bit in this series, which I felt a little bit bad for. Was it, well, the one game he was 0-4-0? Was it Renekton?
He
I
played
don't
an R. He
remember.
played an R game where he was free.
Maybe it was,
Like he had
maybe it
like
was
an
a NAR game.
05 NAR game or something like that.
That could have been it. I just remember feeling really bad because when you play your old team, you want to get back at them, right? Like you
Yeah.
want to win, and getting swept 3-0, like I don't care who you are, that stings. You can't pretend that doesn't sting. That freaking sucks. So I felt bad for Impact a little bit, but look, man, Alfari's good. He plays a lot of different matchups really well, and right now he's playing everything and winning or doing better than he should be in just about every matchup. I think he's probably leading the league in CSD at this point. I think Alfari has been a very good, I don't want to say surprise because we knew we were getting a good top laner in the LCS, but definitely a very, very good import, and we don't always see that many in the LCS. So Alfari absolutely looking amazing right now.
Yeah, it was sort of unfortunate that Impact kind of got shut down so hard, and I think that's just like you said, credit to Alfari and how good he is, because it did feel like that a lot of EG's wins in the early stages of the lock-in were coming from Impact, because Renekton was super super strong, and people just kind of learned after week one how powerful Renekton as a champion is. It's for the majority of cases after week one now just banned every game. But to flip to the other side of the map, I actually think Deathly and Ignar had a pretty good series against Team Liquid's bot lane. I think
Yeah.
TL's bot lane had a really good start to the lock-in, and not that they had a bad end to the lock-in, but they were definitely getting contested by the enemy bot lanes of EG and Cloud9. I think, you know,
Yeah.
I don't think they, moving into the season, I don't think Tactical or Core JJ is miles ahead than anybody else. I would say that I don't think there's a single bot lane in the LCS that is miles ahead than anybody else. I think it's actually very close with this clump
It
of
feels
bot
like we have
lanes.
some good bot lanes right
Yeah,
now,
like
right? Like
like you
with
have the
100
TL
Thieves,
bot
C9,
lane.
TL.
Yeah, you have the 100 Thieves bot lane, the C9 bot lane, the EG bot lane, and the 100 Thieves bot lane are all looking strong. And I think that is a really good dynamic to have, because I think, especially when you have a lot of weak bot lanes, like games can be really bad when there is like a huge bot lane difference. We kind of saw in the Cloud9 series, despite the huge top lane difference, Cloud9 was still able to pull out wins. And I think the reverse cannot be said for the bot lane. I think if you're getting completely smashed in bot lane, it's much harder to, sort of recover and come back from that.
And another thing we saw in this series, I mean, we saw it in the finals as well, but in this series is just Core JJ still looking amazing. Like, to me, he just continues to prove that he is the best player in the LCS right now.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, of course that could change, but it is kind of crazy to see time and time again how good he is at setting up plays and just like how much value he brings to his team being a support player. Like that guy carries with his playmaking, and I think you saw it in this series. I think he was one of the reasons that TL swept 3-0. But the main thing for me is that every single time EG started to have started to find a pick or something started to go their way, they would always try to snowball it a little bit too hard and things would get turned around on them.
Yeah.
So like XTL player would get caught out or something like that. EG would go to punish, and every time they went to punish, it would like take too long for them to catch out that player, and it would turn into a team fight where TL members would show up and clean up the rest of the fight after EG got their initial pick. And that seemed to happen in every single game. Anytime TL did a little slip up, EG would go to punish, and TL would punish the punish like way more and completely wipe them, and the game was just over. What you thought was a close game was suddenly just over and going in TL's fashion and or TL's way or whatever. And I think that was pretty much summed up the series.
Mhm.
Even though it was a 3-0, EG put up a fight in just about every game, I would say.
Yeah, and I think that's what you have to do when you are just outclassed individually. You have to punish the mistakes that your opponent is making. And, EG went for it. When they saw Team Liquid mistakes, they tried to punish it as hard as they could. Obviously, the majority of time, it kind of just got flipped around on them. But I think that's the correct thing that you have to do when you are facing a team that is so much better than you.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. Do you want to swap over to the finals now?
The finals,
Cloud9 and Team Liquid in the finals, the lock-in final.
yeah, the trap card failed in game 5 or something. I don't know.
Dude, this series was really good.
Yeah.
I don't think you could ask for anything more for like a tournament that quote unquote doesn't really mean anything. We talked about it at the start of the show that like this lock-in tournament was great, and I think one of the reasons it was so great was the finals was incredibly hyped. If you could ask people who they wanted to see play in the finals, pretty much everyone, let's say, would have said C9 versus TL because they're the two most hyped teams coming into the tournament, right?
Mm-hmm. For sure.
Yeah. And I think that even though I think the series started off like there was a chance that TL could just sweep it, and then all of a sudden we saw Cloud9 start to show up, and I think I got some G2 perks vibes. Not because he was absolutely popping off, but more so in the macro game, specifically in game 4 when he was playing the Twisted Fate and we saw them use that ultimate. First of all, Cloud9 was just flat out winning the game and they started to throw a little bit just like G2, and then they made that macro play where TF just ulted to the top lane and started grabbing inhib, and then it was just pulling TL across the map. I really got the G2 vibes out of Perkster, and that was
it's
really
the G2
weird.
angle.
Yeah, it was the G2 angle. Win early, start to throw, and find a way to win. That's exactly what Game 4 was, and that's what pushed it to a Game 5. But the series was great.
Yeah, I actually had it wrong. I was just pulling up the games here, but the Malphite pick was in game 3. But it was a super exciting series. Game 1 was kind of just like a write-off because Team Liquid got ahead, got a Baron, and just quickly closed out the game, kind of like 100 Thieves did to Cloud9 in those early games. But I want to just talk about Game 2 a little bit because I feel like that was I think, a game that C9 should have won.
Refresh my memory a little bit.
That was the game where they picked the Karma top lane with the Olaf jungle, and Blabber was absolutely popping off on the Gore Drinker Olaf. And and they had the Senna Tom, and it kind of just seemed like Cloud9 started to get careless again, like I was mentioning before. They started making a lot of mistakes in the mid game, and I think Core JJ, that was the game he was playing the Blitzcrank, did a really good job of hooking enemies whenever possible, blowing the Olaf ulti, hooking the Tom Kench plenty of times in team fights. And when you're getting that Tom Kench out of Cloud9 in terms of how their team comp works, like that just makes it so the Senna can't play the game, the Karma can't be as aggressive as she wants to be in terms of running with the Olaf, because when you're playing like Moonstone Renewer, Moonstone Sapphire Flowing Water Karma with the Olaf, you gotta like follow the Olaf and kind of jump in a bit with the enemy team to like be able to stay in range of buffing up that Olaf. But I thought that game 2 was actually a game that Cloud9 should have won. kind of with how the game was going and how the whole draft worked out. But again, they just made a ton of mistakes, and you can make those mistakes sometimes against a team like 100 Thieves, but not against a team like Liquid Team who is so polished and just so good.
That game I felt like was over when I saw draft, and not because I thought either team had an awful draft or an awesome draft. Just the one pick when I saw Core JJ lock in the Blitzcrank into the Tom Kench, I was just like, this guy is too good on Blitzcrank, and Blitzcrank is too good into the Tom Kench that I just knew that that game would be lost somehow. It wasn't like he absolutely hard carried on the Blitzcrank, but I mean, he did have a good game. But it's just so good to be able to pull Tom Kench and you just melt his shield with the Blitzcrank ulti. Just that alone, when I saw that, I was like, man, I don't see C9 winning this game just because of how good Core JJ is on Blitzcrank. He always finds a pick, always. And I do have to say, also, Perks was a little bit careless when he went to go check Baron that one time too.
Yeah,
You got to respect the Blitzcrank.
yeah, there was just a ton of times where Cloud9 was like clearing vision over a wall or even walking in blindly, and you just can't do these kinds of things against a Blitzcrank, especially in pro play where you just have to assume that if you're walking into your jungle and you have a sweeper on and you're hitting a ward in some random bush, you got to expect that Blitzcrank is in the area waiting to hook you. And that pretty much any time that happened, I think I can remember like on 3 separate occasions where Cloud9 was either like semi face checking or clearing vision in their bot side jungle. Core GJ would hook somebody in, force a flash, force an Olaf ultimate, or just like hook the Tom Kench and kill him. And I think, the game really started to fall apart for Cloud9 kind of around like 22 to like 25 minutes, where they just got picked off a couple times in a row. And then like Team Liquid starts doing Baron. Perks is just randomly face checking on LeBlanc for no reason. And he dies, and TL gets a Baron and win the game.
He can't be the one to face check that. Like you
Yeah.
can't. There are. I mean, don't get me wrong. It's not easy checking Baron when you have no vision, but you can't have your carry being the one doing that.
Mm-hmm.
But anyways, a player that I wanted to highlight from the series was actually Blabber. I thought Blabber had a really good series.
Mm-hmm.
You don't see Santorin get out jungled very often. Um, can you remind me which game it was? I don't even remember which game it was, but there was a game where Blabber just completely outpathed them. I
It
think he was playing the
was.
Udyr into the Olaf. Was that
Yeah,
the matchup?
it was the game too. It was where he was playing
Was it the
Olaf.
same game?
Yeah, he was playing Olaf into Santorin's Udyr. It was game 2. It was where he started his Raptors and then did a full clear and then basically sacked double Scuttle Crab to then go back to Santorin's Raptors to take it again, and then was pretty much, he was Olaf just naturally outpaces Udyr in the early game if he's full clearing. So he pretty much was just up about 4 camps within the first 2 clears because of how fast paced Olaf goes. And that's why I think that Cloud9 early game and the position that they were in that game too was actually going so well for them. It was just kind of, like I said, they made a ton of mistakes, and Core JJ did a really good job on the blitz. He's just carrying on support. There's not a lot of players in the league who carry playing support, and Core JJ did that in game 2.
Well, and the other thing that I want to say is, even though that was the one game that I wanted to highlight, it wasn't like that was the only game Blabber looked good. I thought that he actually looked good for almost the whole series, if not the whole series.
Yeah.
I do think that he played at the level that was deserving of a series win. I think that the real gap, and again, I mean, it's got to be said, the gap was in the top lane. The
Mm-hmm.
only game that Fudge actually looked good was when he got the hard counter, and albeit he did look really good in that game, he had a really nice flash ulti play on the Aurelia. That was when he played Aurelia into the Gnar.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that was game 4, I believe.
Yeah.
Um, he took a counter matchup and he smashed with it, which is what you need to do if you're going to pick Aurelia. You need to freaking win lane, and he did that. So you got to give props for that. But after his flash ulti play, I felt like he didn't really have much impact later in the game. When you're that much further ahead, I think you should be able to split and pull a lot of more people towards you on your side of the map. I think that you can really pressure a side lane when you have that kind of advantage, and I don't think he did. And then the rest of the series, he was just getting gapped again. And so I know it's early, but I do think that C9 needs to worry about their top lane. A lot of people will say he'll get better, and maybe he will, but I think it is already time to be hitting the panic button, not just because he's losing, but because he's losing hard. Like it does not look right now like he belongs in the LCS. It's not just Alfari that he's getting beat by. He's pretty much getting beat by every top laner that he's played against, right?
I don't know. I would actually push back on that a little bit. I would argue that the only lanes that he like truly lost were their first game of the series, the first game of the tournament against Impact, the
When he was
series
playing
against,
Ornn.
yeah, he's playing
That's
Ornn
fine
into
though. You should
Renekton.
lose that.
He's
You
playing
should
Ornn
lose
into
that. That's fine.
Renekton, and then he
Yeah.
played 100 Thieves. He pretty much got smashed every single game. But I actually think that he did a decent job in the Team Liquid series. I think the only game where he got completely dominated from start to finish was in that game 5. But I think in every other game, he actually did a much better job. He kept up a lot better in game 1 in that Jax versus Camille matchup. In game 2, he's playing the Karma top lane, and you're just naturally going to get a little bit behind, but it doesn't matter as much because you're playing a champion, which requires a lot less gold. So I think given the situation in that game, yes, he was down like maybe 20 CS, but like Alfari's farming at 10 CS a minute, and you're expected to lose
Yeah.
a little bit of farm. I think that's fine. Game 3, I think he did exactly what he was supposed to that game with the Malphite pick. And game 4, like you said, he destroyed top lane in the early game. So I wouldn't say that I'm not ready to hit the panic button for Fudge. If you take a look at it, he lost to the 3 best top laners in the league. And
Yeah.
as a fan of Cloud9, who's pulling in, you could argue, is a pretty much a rookie top laner, he lost to the 3 best top laners in the league, and I think that's acceptable. And specifically in that BO5 against Alfari, while he was a problem, he wasn't like, it wasn't like, holy shit, this is a huge problem. It was like, okay, there are a lot of things to take away from this lock-in tournament for Fudge, and I think he will improve. I think we're definitely going to see a lot of scenarios where he's playing up against much weaker top laners, and that will be okay. But I think Fudge does have a lot of room to grow, and I think he will get better.
So I agree with all that, and I guess saying panic button isn't totally fair, because panic button makes it sound like we got to get rid of this guy and we have to get someone else. I don't think that's the case, but I will say that especially against 100 Thieves, it was absolutely a problem, and I don't think that you should lose that hard, especially across a whole best of 5. Um, and to Mo2 in the live chat brings up my next point that I wanted to bring up is that Cloud9 sunk a lot of money into their roster this year. And if you have that much of an investment in the rest of your lineup, you should expect him to play to the level of the rest of the lineup. And he is not doing that. And I'm glad Mo2 brought it up because that's exactly what I was going to say next was what is the other option? Like, let's say this continues, and but let's be clear, he can still get better. But what if he doesn't? What are your options as Cloud9? I don't know if there's not any great options, let's say that, but I think there are options, and I think if you're Cloud9, you should already start looking into what your options are, even if you don't act on them. I don't think you give up on Fudge. I need to be clear on that. I don't think you give up on Fudge, but we have seen 17 games now, which is a lot of games, mind you. It's only over the span of 3 weeks, but we have seen 17 games. And when you sink that much money into a team, you're ready to go to Worlds. And if you have that big of a gap, you might not make it to Worlds. And so I think that Jack should start looking into what his other options are, even if he doesn't want to act on them yet. And just, I think his options right now would be you either bring up from Academy, which let's be honest, Darshan has not been an LCS player for some time now. So I don't think that is a great option. Or you look to pick up someone from another team. Hanser is playing an academy right now. I don't know if TSM is willing to give him up. Solo is playing for CLG right now. I don't know if they're willing to give him up right now. And Lorlo would be the other option for me if you had to go that route. Again, need to clarify, we're not there yet, but you need to plan ahead in the LCS, especially when you make that much of an investment. You paid like 5 million for perks, and so I think those are your options if you're Cloud9. Yeah, I don't think any of them are great, but again, not there yet.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I'm not exactly of that opinion. Like, they played 17 games, and you could make the argument that Fudge was the liability in 7 of them. I would say the 500 Thieves games, the one Team Liquid game in Game 5, and the first game against Evil Geniuses. And like that puts him that he had 10 solid to good games and 7 bad games. And maybe Jack needs to write down names on a piece of paper and put them in his back pocket, but I don't think Cloud9 is even at the stage yet of considering replacing Fudge. I think, you know,
See, when you
Cloud9.
say to me, when you say 7 suboptimal games, is that fair? Suboptimal? Is that a fair assessment?
Well, I'm maybe not suboptimal, but they were bad games. I said bad games.
Whatever. How? Okay, bad games. 7 bad games is a lot of bad games. And back to the point of for what Cloud9 is needing right now, they paid for a win now roster. And I think that 7 games out of the 17, that is a lot, man. That is really, really a lot of bad games, and I don't think you could have that. Um, but again, it's really early. He can get better, and to be quite honest, I do think he will get better. But you can't always count on that, and that's why I think you need to have a backup plan, and that's why I bring it up.
Yeah, I don't know. I still, again, it's 7 games, but you got to take into consideration. He again, 5 of those games were against Someday, and that is a top laner that the majority of LCS top laners are going to lose to. And I think, yes, he was very poor. He had very poor performances in those games. But I think if you're going to fail, it's better to fail now than fail come playoff time. And I think
Absolutely.
even in just the 2-day span of the 100 Thieves series, moving to the Team Liquid series, Fudge had a much better series. And to be honest, I would rather Fudge get dumpstered by Someday than dumpstered by Alfari, because I don't think you can get dumpstered in a player cannot get dumpstered individually against Team Liquid and expect to win as opposed to 100 Thieves. You know, like think of regular season. Cloud9 is going to be playing 9 other LCS teams, and if Fudge gets worst case scenario, if Fudge gets completely obliterated in 3 of those 9 games, being at Impact, Someday, and Alfari, if that's the worst case scenario, Cloud9's what, like 6-3 then? But if Fudge can improve, and he will, results will be better. I don't think.
We
think.
My top laner. Actually, okay, on that note, just for people wondering why I'm saying my top laner, I drafted him this year in my fantasy thing. He's kind of been a stinker. And on that note, I did promise. Did I lose? I don't know if I lost. I should. Let me double check this really, really quick.
I don't even know
Give me
if I
5
lost, to
seconds.
be honest. Scott was kind of
5
like, Scott was
seconds.
making a bit of a comeback on me, I think.
did lose. Okay, so I promised my opponent or opponents this week that I would shout them out if I lost in fantasy. And so hats off to Steven and Lana for beating me this week in fantasy. Top diff. I don't even actually Impact didn't even have that great of a week. But anyways, yeah, there's my shout out, and I'm a little bit salty about it, but there, I did it.
Yeah, just so everyone knows, just because I want to rub it in his face a little bit, Blue Jays 0-3 in our fantasy league, and I'm 3-0. So
I won last year. Okay, that's my saving grace. We'll see come playoff time who's on top. All I need to do is
second
squeeze into
place.
playoffs.
I didn't lose any money last year, so I'll take that.
Yeah, big time dub last year. I'll turn it around. Fudge will turn it around. Sword Art needs to turn it around. PoE. My roster's supposed to be stacked. I don't know. Anyways, with all that said, on the LCS Lock In Tournament, the MVP of last week was Core JJ. I believe they gave it to. But who was your MVP for the whole tournament?
I considered a number of people for picking who I thought was the tournament MVP. The ones that I had just for my list were Sven, Vulcan, Core JJ, Alfari, and Jensen. Those were my 5 people that I initially considered, and I kind of narrowed that down to either Sven and Core JJ, and ended up going with Sven. And the main reason why I went with Sven is because, yes, he might not have been the absolute best player on the best team. I do think that MVP is a little bit more than that in terms of like your value to the team. And I think that Sven was doing a ton of work for Cloud9 in this whole series. Yes, he was carrying Fudge for the majority of it, but he had a ton of great games in this series. He was really popping off on the Senna Tom Kench combo. He had 2 pentas in their reverse sweep against 100 Thieves. And even in a lot of the games that Cloud9 ended up losing in the lock-in tournament, I think Sven was actually playing very, very well and was playing at a super high level. I think him and Vulcan, they're doing a really good job. I think they can easily contend with the other top bot lanes in the league. And I went with Sven in the end of it.
Yeah, no, I mean, let's be honest. Cloud9's bot lane was insane. I actually went with Vulcan. And for me, I had 2 people. It was between him and Core JJ. Both of them were absolutely carrying their teams. However, the reason why I leaned Vulcan was again because of carrying Fudge in the top lane. Like, here's the thing: if Core JJ wasn't there, like they could still win games because Alfari was playing well, Santorin looked good, Jensen looked good, Tactical looked good. The reason I went with Vulcan is because I don't think the same could be said about Cloud9. I really do think it was their bot lane. To me, I edged out on the side of Vulcan just because I thought his Alistar was amazing. And a lot of people will say, oh, he one-tricked the tournament. First of all, not really. Second of all, I don't care even if he did. He was really, really good and was absolutely hard carrying through the support role. Yeah, it was Core JJ. You could say the same thing, but again, I just think the weight to carry was a little bit more on the Cloud9 side, and that's why I edged towards Vulcan. But I think either one of them are deserving of the MVP for the whole tournament. They both looked really, really good.
Yeah,
With
oh,
Go ahead.
I was just gonna say my main reasoning for leaning more towards a Cloud9 player than a Team Liquid player was sort of for the reasons that you kind of outlined. Like all the players on Team Liquid were playing well, and I think you maybe sub one of those players on Team Liquid for a lesser player, they're probably going to perform just as well, maybe a tiny bit worse. But like you said, the same could not be said for Cloud9. I think if in current form of Cloud9, if you took out either Blabber, Sven, or Vulcan, that team goes down like a significant notch in terms of their performance. I think those three players for Cloud9 did a ton of the work in this lock-in tournament, and that is why I guess I'm a little more hopeful for Cloud9 and Fudge even moving forward, because I think there's a lot of room to grow.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. Let's go to Popoff. Who did you have popping off this week?
I had Core JJ.
I mean, yeah.
The dude, like, I know we just like didn't pick him for the tournament MVP, but like that guy was straight. Like his Thresh is so good. Like his Thresh is so good. Those first two games in that Evil Geniuses series, it just seemed like that was the game where they kind of first whipped out this like Udyr Thresh combo that they were doing. It was pretty disgusting. Core JJ is just so smart about like how he plays the game, positioning, what he's doing on the map. Like we were talking about his Blitzcrank in game 2, really shutting down like all of Cloud9 and what they were doing in that second game when Cloud9 sort of started to lose control in the mid game, and Core JJ is just out here like hooking everybody, and it's over.
So I actually think that Core JJ is a really good Leona player too, and I know Leona, like, it's not a flashy champion just because Leona is a lower skill cap champion, but his Leona is great. He sets up so many plays with Leona, and it just feels like no matter what you put him on, he's going to play at top tier. So I do agree with that. However, I don't remember the last time I've seen a guy get back-to-back pentakills in back-to-back games, so I had to go with Sven. Even though I didn't pick him for my lock-in tournament MVP, I had to give him Popoff award. He was insane, dude. 2 pentakills, and again, maybe not on the most skilled AD carry, but those ultis were absolutely just so gross. And yeah, I don't know, pentakills, baby. That's what you want to see. Popoff.
Yeah.
I go Sven.
I looked this up actually, but it's the first time in League history where a single player gets 2 pentas in a best of 5. There have been other series where there have been multiple pentakills in a best of 5, but never where it's the same person in a full best of 5. It's happened in best of 3s before, but never in a best of 5. Thought that was kind of interesting.
Yeah, that is really interesting. All right, Beansoup Award. Who disappointed you this week?
I gave it.
Yeah, this week.
Yeah, I gave it to DeMonte. I thought.
Really?
Yeah, like I was not in my first look of in the 100 Thieves Cloud9 series, like when we were watching it live, but when I went back and kind of looked at the series, DeMonte wasn't really doing too much. I know they won that first game, but he kind of like griefed that tower dive top lane at level 4 when Fudge was playing Lulu and Cloud9 was playing that scaling comp, and they kind of like threw. But then like they had like 3 Rise picks in that series against Cloud9 that I thought were really, really useless. And obviously when we were watching the games, NA's Finest in here was really, maybe it was Mo2 as well, but one of them was really saying how they dislike the Rise pick so much because of how AFK it is. But I don't know.
I liked the Rise pick just because of, well, twice they used it to ulti towards Baron and just yoink Baron, right? They utilized that. Although you can fault Cloud9 for not being ready for that.
I don't know.
That's just what Rise does.
Just looking back,
I think that they used it to their advantage.
Yeah, like just watching back this series, I just thought he was, minus Fudge, he was the worst player in that series, and It definitely was a
Interesting.
big consideration of going the route of Fudge, but I mean, they ended up winning the series, and like
I
I
never
mentioned
even considered
before,
Demonte. I didn't think he had that bad of a series, but I don't know. I guess he didn't really stand out much to me. I don't really remember, honestly.
yeah, I thought he was the main reason for like 100 Thieves actually like kind of getting reverse swept. I feel like he fell off super hard in games 3, 4, and 5, because he had like the double rise game. He had that set mid game where they picked set mid, and they also had Galio sup. And I feel like if they would have switched those two champions into their opposite roles, like they have Galio go mid and set go support, I think that draft is way better from 100 Thieves. But yeah.
Yeah. For me, I don't think anyone's gonna be surprised by this. My Bean Soup Award for disappointment goes to my top laner. Hashtag my top laner. Fudge was just disappointing, man. I don't want to harp too much more because we've said so much about it. He was very underwhelming, very disappointing, running it down more than I would like. Let's leave it at that. I won't. Fudge was Bean Soup this week, and I expect a little bit better.
Okay. Yeah, I think he'll get better. I got faith, and I don't know. Maybe I'm just a bit biased, and I probably am.
My
But
top laner. Let's go, baby.
they'll be back. I think it's
Time to
more
turn it
actually for
around.
you that you need TSM to look a bit better.
I need TSM to turn it around, and I need Fudge to really turn it around. But anyways, let's get into our power rankings. We went a little bit different. We went a different way with it this week because we did our power rankings before the season started because we just thought that would be fun to do as like a prediction for where we think teams will end at the end of the year. And we wanted to do an updated power rankings just based off how teams are right now. So we're going to pull them both up on the screen, and for our listeners we will say what they are, but we did both because I don't know, I just think it's better to show both. If we have the information, why not, right? So I'll let you take it away, JNT, and
Yeah.
explain what our
So
power rankings.
yeah, just what we threw up, like Blue Jay mentioned. We noted our power rankings before the lock-in tournament started. We didn't actually ever talk about it on any of our episodes, but we just wrote them down because we figured we may want to check back in on them. So before the lock-in, we'll just read them out for the audio-only people. But I had Cloud9 ranked number 1, TL number 2, 100 Thieves number 3, TSM 4, EG 5, FlyQuest 6, CLG 7, Immortals 8, Dig 9, and Golden Guardians 10. And to flip over to Blue Jay, we had similar sort of structure, but a lot of just like teams that are just like if you swap one position, they kind of work. So Blue Jay had TL1, C9 2, TSM 3, 100 Thieves 4, EG 5, Dignitas 6, actually, which is the biggest difference. FlyQuest 7, Golden Guardians 8, Immortal. Oh, I'm reading the wrong one. I've just now realized this. Okay. Sorry.
Try again.
Try again. 100 the. Sorry. Oh God, this is not going well. TL1, C9 2, TSM 3, 100 Thieves 4, EG 5, CLG 6, FlyQuest 7, Dignitas 8, Immortals 9, Golden Guardians 10. Okay. Sorry that you might have to like re-listen to that and just so I got it right though in the end.
It's a lot of information to take in as a listener. We know
Yeah.
that. We apologize for that. We do, if you are watching on YouTube, we do have it up there on the screen.
Yeah.
Um, the biggest thing I think for me actually was I'm kind of surprised with TSM. Honestly, I thought that their bot lane would look a lot better, and it just doesn't. Um, I would say even that the most disappointing thing about TSM has been their bot lane. Been a lot of focus on Huni, but for how much money you sunk into your bot lane, and I don't want to. That doesn't mean I'm blaming Sword Art because he's the one with the $3 million contract or whatever. But for how much money you're sinking into that, you should be able to either play around it, or have them come out with leads, or get some sort of advantage out of the bot lane. And I don't think we're seeing that, and that could be attributed to just look. It's only been a few weeks. You need more time. Um, but you better freaking hurry up because Sword Art is getting me minus points right now in my fantasy league, and I
Yeah.
need more.
Yeah, it was kind of just like a weird lock-in tournament for TSM because it sort of felt like that. What did they go? They went 2-2, or did they go? No, they went 3-1. But it felt like they should have been 2-2, and they kind of got lucky in a sense. Or they, I
Wait, who are we
sorry,
talking about?
I'm talking about TSM.
I think they went 2-2, didn't they?
Thought they went.
Oh, I don't remember.
Oh no,
Chef Tono's in the
they know
chat.
they went to they went 2-2 because
Okay.
they lost to 100 Thieves and Team Liquid and beat Golden Guardians and CLG, and they should have lost to Golden Guardians. But
Yeah.
what I was gonna
Yeah, they
say,
really should have.
what I was gonna say is they actually kind of got unlucky in my opinion, because I feel like if they would have lost that series to Golden Guardians, they would have played EG instead of playing Cloud9, and I feel like they could have actually beaten EG in that like best of 3 quarterfinal match. And who knows, maybe they're in semis, and then we don't know how that would play out. But it kind of felt like they got unlucky by getting that game against Golden Guardians thrown to them.
Yeah, that would actually be a really close series, honestly. I think TSM versus EG. Honestly, TSM, C9, and EG, I don't think there's a big difference between them right now. I actually think that all of those games, if they were all to play each other, I think you would have some pretty close games.
Mm-hmm.
The other thing that I wanted to note was that I actually, in my post lock-in power rankings, I have 100 Thieves ahead of Cloud9 despite losing to them right now. I mentioned earlier that I think 100 Thieves is still the better team right now. And so that's the only thing that I think is really eye popping right now. Like, what? Like, why do you have 100 Thieves ahead of Cloud9? Well, I just think that they're still better. And I know a lot of people will disagree with that, and that's fine. I think that I think because it was a best of 5 series, I think there was some pressure on 100 Thieves. And I actually think that that could be one of the reasons why they ended up actually choking. I think if it's a regular season game, I think 100 Thieves just beats them in the best of one.
Yeah, my reasoning actually for putting Cloud9 ahead of that, because I do think it's a valid argument that I'm not going to disagree with your argument that 100 Thieves would beat Cloud9 in a best of 1. But like I did mention before, I feel like with Cloud9 making so many mistakes and being able to pull off the win in that series is kind of why I have them at number 2. And again, it might be a little bias on my part because I'm a Cloud9 fan, and I do just have faith that they will improve, because Cloud9, I just said Cloud9. Cloud9.
Clown9. Clown9 in the chat. Let's
No, no,
go.
no, 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 no. I do have faith that Perks will get better, because we got to be honest. Like, Perks is like not even looking like close to like Perks form in G2,
Yeah.
and
Well, that's
Fudge
totally true.
Fudge will improve.
And the other thing that I want to point out too is that both of us, and I actually want to re-explain this just to reiterate, the pre-lock-in power rankings obviously is we had to guess how they would be at the end of the year because we had no information to go off of. The post-lock-in power rankings are how they are right now. Just to be clear, I know that could be a little bit confusing, but that's how we did it. We did pre-lock-in. We did how we think they will end the season. Post lock-in, we did how they are right now, who we think would beat who. So, for example, in my power rankings, I have FlyQuest 7 and Golden Guardians 8. I think FlyQuest would beat Golden Guardians. That's basically how we did it. But I want to point out, you and I both have CLG in the
Yeah,
10 spot.
I was gonna say that. Like, I feel like
That's because we don't know, we don't know what to do with their roster right now. Like, they don't know what to do with their roster. They don't know when Brox is coming over. At least I don't think they've said anything that they know. And, well, that leaves you with Griffin, aka Wiggly, and we just make fun of CLG every damn episode. But
yeah.
yeah, they're not good right now, and I would have them losing to any other team in the league right now. So yeah,
Yeah,
CLG 10.
it's funny because like if you look at our pre-lock-in power rankings, like we had some hopes for CLG. Blue Jay put them as 6th place. That means they would make playoffs. I had them just outside of playoffs, being 7th. But it just
Well, no,
feels
playoffs are top 8 now. Remember
well,
that.
not in the spring playoffs. Not in the
True.
spring playoffs. So, what was I about to say? Yeah, we both have CLG at 10th. They did not look good at all during the lock-in tournament. They did get that one win against 100 Thieves. To be honest, I don't really remember much about that game. I just remember that Wild Turkey was like kind of popping off on Jin or something like that.
Wild Turkey.
Yeah, he was popping off on Jin or something. But for the most part, CLG looked pretty bad in all of their group stage games, and it just feels like Broxa is gonna like get screwed again with this whole visa situation. Because another thing to note is the spring season is actually shorter now. I think it's only
There's
six.
not much time to catch up.
It's
right?
only 6 weeks, if I remember correctly.
I think you're right.
The spring split is only 6 weeks. Top 6 goes to playoffs winner to MSI, and the summer season is 9 weeks with an 8-team playoff. So if CLG doesn't get
Well, and the other
Broxa
thing, too,
until
is
like week 3, week 4, you could be looking at a winless team that could maybe, like, they just don't have a lot of time to gel and pick up some wins.
Yeah, well, and the other thing too is like we always focus on Wiggly or Griffin. Like I don't know what the hell to call him, but honestly, I think Smoothie looks really bad right now too. I thought he had a really bad tournament. I was really disappointed with Smoothie, and so he's a guy that he's going to be around no matter what. Like we could talk about Griffin will be replaced by Broxa eventually, but I don't think Smoothie's getting replaced unless they use their academy support, which I'm not going to lie, I don't even remember who it is right now. And I think that that's another problem too. I think Wild Turtle's been fine. Maybe not great. I think he was better on FlyQuest than he was on CLG. But right now, you're playing with Smoothie, and I don't know what happened to Smoothie, but he looks really bad. Like
Yeah.
there are times where I'm watching, and he doesn't seem to do anything proactive. You put him on an Alistair, and he's not doing anything with it. You need to make plays if you're on Alistair, and he does nothing. So I'm really disappointed in Smoothie, or what we had seen from Smoothie at the start of the lock-in tournament. Mind you, only 4 games, really small sample size for CLG, but yeah, there's a reason I have them in last. And then Immortals, I don't know who the hell they have starting, so I put them ninth as well. I even have Golden Guardians ahead of them. I think we could both agree that Golden Guardians has been a very good surprise.
Hmm.
Look, like we have them ninth and eighth on our power rankings post lock in, which is still like you're still at the bottom of the league. But for how bad, I thought they were an easy 10th. And I think most people thought they were an easy 10th. And despite them not looking great still, I think that they probably had about as good of a showing as they can. And so I think that's another thing that's pretty noteworthy is that they could take some games where I didn't think they would. I thought they would probably win about 5 games over the whole year out of their 45 game season. I thought they would probably win about 5 games. With the way they're looking now, I could see them taking a little bit more than 5. I don't know what the number is, but I don't think they're as bad as I initially thought.
Yeah, I definitely agree. I think Golden Guardians will look much better in the summer split than they will in the spring split. And part of that was my reasoning for having them at ninth as opposed to eighth. We were kind of having this discussion a little bit before the broadcast started, just to like, sure, CLG is probably going to look really bad in the spring split because they're not going to have Broxa most likely for the first few weeks, and they could get off to a slow start, but that doesn't necessarily mean that they will look like the worst team in the league because, presumably if they get their roster, they will add Finn and Broxa. They have the potential to look a lot better. And I kind of see that the same way with Golden Guardians is we saw a ton of rookie mistakes out of this team in the first week of the in the first 2 weeks of the lock-in tournament. And
Yeah.
individually, I think they're actually not that bad and across many of their roles. I think the biggest surprise for me was Stixay actually performing quite well. And Iconic as well, I think, was a pretty decent jungler. I was expecting jungle to be a huge problem for Golden Guardians, mainly because I just really had no clue who Iconic was. But he came out, he played pretty well, and I think a lot of these players, you just got to give them time. I really hope that Golden Guardians just doesn't abandon ship halfway through the season or partway through
I don't
summer or
think they
something.
will.
I
I
don't
don't
think
think
they
they will.
will. I really hope they don't. I hope they stick with this roster because I think they could squeak into playoffs in the summer split, and who knows, maybe we'll get a little miracle run or something.
The only other team that I want to highlight, which to me is interesting because neither one of us had them move. You had FlyQuest 6 in pre and post, and I had them 7 pre and post. But even though they're still in the same spot for me, I am a little bit more worried for FlyQuest now than I was before.
Worried?
And
What?
I'm,
Oh, really?
pardon me?
You're more worried for them?
Yes, because I think Licorice was very hit or miss, and I don't think he was that hit or miss when he was on Cloud9. Maybe towards the end of his Cloud9 days, he was a little bit more coin flip, but um, I'm a little bit worried for him because I mentioned this a couple weeks ago that I thought he was on a slight decline, and I think that was we've seen a slight decline since he's been on FlyQuest as well. But more importantly, Johnson has looked hit or miss, and you and I have talked up Johnson a lot on this podcast, how we think like he's a really good AD, and we thought he was great when he was on Dignitas, and it was a big mistake to get rid of him. And while I do still stand behind that, I think that Johnson had a really weak first week. Week. That gets a little bit confusing, but he did look weak in the first week of play, and I'm a little bit worried for that as well. Maybe there's more synergy that needs to be built up with Diamond. Maybe there needs to be more synergy built up with Jose Diodo, who they only had 2 games played with.
Yeah,
But
I
go ahead.
think that FlyQuest, they looked really bad in the first week of the lock-in, but I
Yeah.
do think a lot of that could be attributed to them having a sub jungler in NXI, and Diamond did have a poor performance, and I'd have to go back and look to see like if it was Diamond was just like straight running it, or if both of them were playing bad and Diamond and Johnson were playing bad. I don't really know, but I feel like the parts of FlyQuest that I thought, excuse me, that I was a bit nervous for, that kind of showed in the first week of the lock-in. But when they did get Jose Diodo in, I thought they looked a lot better. And similar to Cloud9, this team has a lot of room to grow, I think, and we'll just have to see, but I do kind of have faith.
And we also said, you and I both said, well, not even just us, lots of people said about FlyQuest, like this was the hardest team to pinpoint where to put them in any power rankings. And I don't think that's changed. I think there is still the world where they finish anywhere from like 3rd to 10th. Like it is a wide window. Maybe 3rd is a little bit extreme now, but before the season, I know that there were some analysts saying there was a world where FlyQuest could finish 3rd. And not with the worst of arguments too. So I don't see that happening anymore, but definitely I still think they're the hardest team to pinpoint where they should fall. And then I think Dignitas looks okay. I do want to I think a lot of people will look at Dignitas as being a bad team, but I do want to remind people that they put up a really good fight in their last game against Cloud9. So that's why I still have Dignitas higher on the list over at the 6th spot, and you have them at the 7. I still think I don't think they're as bad as a lot of people are holding them to. I don't think they're that weak of a team, but I mean, we'll see. Spring split starts in just like 5 days or so, so we'll get to see very shortly. Was there anything else, J&T, that you wanted to look at before we move on?
Just to add on to the Dignitas point, my issues or flaws that I thought about this roster before the lock-in tournament, I think still hold true in the fact that they really don't have a star player. While I do think Aframu still is a pretty decent player, I think he'll just naturally be a lot weaker because he doesn't have as good of an AD carry playing the game with him. Having a good AD carry will make you look a lot better, and having a not so good AD carry, I'm not going to say Neo or formerly Asta is just straight up bad. He can improve, but in terms of
it is a downgrade.
Yeah,
it is a downgrade.
The majority of the overall Dignitas roster is kind of a downgrade from the previous one. So
I don't know. I don't think a top lane. Viper was not looking very good. So
yeah, but Fake God, I don't think is much better.
Well, I actually do think he's better. I do agree with not much better, but I do have more hopes for Fake God than I did Viper.
Sub Lorlo
Viper was really running it down.
I don't know why Lorlo is not starting. Yeah. I don't want to go down this again, but I don't know. I just think that
I agree though.
This Dig roster, I just don't see how they go out and win versus the big teams. That's all. I think Dignitas could be a team where they have a very good win rate against the bottom tier teams, but a very poor win rate against the top tier teams. They'll be like one of those bottom tier playoff teams that will look really good against the bad teams, and they'll get smashed in first round of playoffs.
All right, you want to move on to predictions?
Yeah, unfortunately, for this week, the LCS schedule isn't actually out yet. So,
yeah, honestly, Beansoup, actually, I changed my Beansoup. It goes to LOL Esports. How do you not have your schedule up for the first week of LCS?
Yeah, the only parts of the schedule we do have are the Friday games, which they threw up on the broadcast at the end of the broadcast after the TLC9 series. So we don't have the schedule for Saturday and Sunday. We will probably just make our predictions for that on Twitter at the time. Probably I don't know. So, wrong thing. I just pulled up.
Do you want to? What are the total scores right now?
Do
you have what the total scores are?
Pulling them up right now.
You got them?
I'm about to pull them up. Yeah. So as you can no, I'm down 1.
Oh.
But mainly you could attribute that to I posted on Twitter right before the C9, right before the final started. I just said fuck it, Cloud9 3-2. Because I even said on the show, I predicted a Cloud9 versus Team Liquid final, and I originally had predicted a Team Liquid win 3-2, and I just changed my mind last minute. Again, it's probably just bias at this point. I wanted C9 to win.
I guess because of the bias, maybe not. If a non-Cloud9 fan took Cloud9 in that series and they won, that's one where I give it an extra half a point for, because I really thought TL was the favorite going into that series. And while they were, that series could have gone either way, man. It was really freaking close. But yeah, right now there's still lots of games to predict and lots of time before the end of the season.
Yeah,
but
I'm down 1.
That's where we're at right now. Okay, let's do the predictions for, I guess, just the Friday games, because that's all we
got. I'm just looking at this first game here, and can we start at the bottom? Because I have no clue who I'm gonna pick in this first game.
Yeah, I do want to I just want to say, like, if people are wondering, like, why don't they start off the season with like a Cloud9 versus TSM? I would be more for that. I think that in other sports you do see rivalries start off the season with like big games like that, C9TL or C9TSM, TSMTL, one of those. The reason why it is TSM and FlyQuest the first game of the year is because those were the two teams that were in the finals last year or last summer. So that's just the way that they do that. So it's not the worst thing ever. But let's be honest, it would be way more hype to see Cloud9 TSM. I think that always brings in the most viewership. But okay, like you were saying, we want to go backwards. We're going to start with the last game.
Yeah,
CLG
I
Dignitas.
just don't know who to pick in the first one. I need like a minute or two to think while we do the other ones.
Okay. All
Okay.
right. All right. Well, okay. CLG Dignitas. I'm taking Dignitas.
Oh man, I don't even know who to. I don't even know who to take in this game. Well, Finn's playing,
I don't.
so
I don't think it would be the biggest thing ever. Like, I don't think it's a huge upset to take CLG. I don't think there's anything wrong with that. I'm still sticking with Dignitas, but
see the problem is CLG is gonna have Wiggly / Griffin playing, so I'm gonna go Dignitas.
and Smoothie.
True. Second last match,
Okay, we
Cloud9
both
versus
got
Golden
Dig.
Guardians. Cloud9, obviously.
Cloud9.
100 Thieves
Yeah.
versus Evil Geniuses. 100 Thieves.
Yeah, I'm going 100 Thieves also.
And then Team Liquid versus Immortals. Team Liquid.
Team Liquid. Who do you got? I'll take whatever team you don't take. There's no
Okay,
fun.
that makes it easier. I'll take TSM.
Let's go, FlyQuest. All right, I got FlyQuest. Let's fucking go, baby.
Okay.
Johnson Popoff time.
Okay.
I think that's it for this week, right?
Yeah, there's not really any quick news because there wasn't any fucking news.
Oh, there was the visual update or something like that.
Oh
that I
yeah,
wanted
Udir's getting a visual update.
Yeah, that was the only thing that there might be some other stuff that's announced on Reddit, but I mean, you guys can go find it. We did sift through Reddit to see if there's anything notable that you guys needed to know. Not too much crazy stuff. And usually, like, we do record this on Monday. For those listening to the recording, usually there's a lot of stuff announced on Monday. This week, not so much. So there's not really a lot of quick news. So none of that for this week. Thank you so much to everyone that showed up in the live chat. We got a lot of spam. Got a lot
Thanks.
of copy pasta. Thanks to everyone that showed up. We had quite a few of you guys in the live chat, and we really like that. Thank you to everyone that listens. Do hit the subscribe or the follow button. Do all that crap, all that good stuff. You know that stuff helps us out a lot. And check out our socials. We got them on the screen at JNT250 and at BlueJ_GG. Anything else before we close out JNT?
I don't know. We'll post our predictions on Twitter. I think I already said that, but I just wrote it down in case I forgot to say that, but I think I said it.
Okay, thanks again, guys. This has been episode 28 of the Clown Fiesta podcast. We will see you guys next week.
Later.